Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast today, Melissa. I guess I'm getting some extra coach client time here.
No, thank you for having me.
So, Melissa, there's going to be plenty of people who are listening to this who are not sure who you are. So, do you want to give people a rundown as to, like, I guess your background getting into what you do as a nutrition and a nutritionist, dietitian, and your background in like doing a bit of powerlifting, doing a bit of physique sports yourself before we
Yeah.
get into the meat topic of today.
Oh my God, yes. So, yeah, I mean, I think you already alluded to like my main titles. I'm a dietitian slash nutrition coach, and I also do a little bit of fitness coaching. It's more a bit smaller, but I was a personal trainer for like 7 years in person and online. So I still dabble in it here and there, but my main focus now is nutrition coaching. So I started out in personal training. I think that that's where a lot of people end up starting a lot of their fitness and nutrition careers. And eventually, like, I wanted to kind of weave in nutrition in there somewhere by becoming a dietitian. So not only did I want to like skyrocket my career in like personal training, but I really wanted to like just add the nutrition piece to kind of like uphold like my credentials and
Mm.
like, have a little bit more validity in like the field. But it turns out that I loved nutrition way more than I ever anticipated to. And lo and behold, I ended up going to university and basically becoming a dietitian. And that's where I started to really like lean into the dietetics realm so much more heavier. I still loved the fitness aspect of things. And I think that that's where I always wanted to end up like long term. And so I wanted to work with like athletes long term. I wanted to, discover different sports. And I think quickly I discovered that I wasn't into traditional sports like football or basketball or swimming or anything along those lines. I loved lifting. So I started out bodybuilding and then I started to do competitive bodybuilding, stepped up on stage in 2021 in like a natural division and then placed second. And it was such a wonderful experience and I loved it so much. And I learned so much from that journey, especially for me coming from a background where I had an eating disorder and I had overcome that. And I really wanted to prove myself that like I could do this without kind of experiencing disordered eating habits and stuff. And it was a success. But there on after, I wanted to try something different. So I think you are also similar in the sense that like in your off season, you just want to try something that's like a little bit less bodybuilding focused. And I switched over to powerlifting literally immediately. Like right after I got out, I was like, I want to do powerlifting and fell in love with that sport too. And somehow I accidentally started niching in powerlifting for nutrition. I don't know how it ended up like happening, but I was like, I really love this sport. I started working for like amazing people in the field and just fell in love with it. And since then, I've kind of just really just stayed in the powerlifting realm. I wouldn't say like I'm into bodybuilding as much anymore, but I still love like talking to people about it and of course like discussing those topics.
So you mentioned when you did your physique competition. So what did you do? Figure? Did you do bikini? What division did you
I did bikini.
do? Okay.
Yeah.
And going into competing after like what would you have said it would have been an eating disorder versus disordered eating? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I had an eating disorder back in college, and I had fully recovered after a few years of discovering that I had it. I think it was about like 5-ish years after like I felt like fully recovered where I decided to like really take that step and say like I want to prove to myself that like I can do this, knowing the risks.
Do you mind me kind of asking you a little bit more about the eating disorder? So
Yeah.
I guess at what point did you realize that you had a problem with food?
It was, I think like I had always had like tendencies growing up. Maybe some people can relate. Like it was heavily stemmed from societal pressures, my family, and always kind of like talking about weight. And so I'd have people tell me like, hey, like you shouldn't eat this because it'll make you fat, or don't eat this because it has too much sugar. People always constantly controlling what I eat, how much I weigh. And when I got to college, that's where it became kind of like a full-fledged like eating disorder. So it got pretty like aggressive where I would go really hard on the weekends with everything, eating, drinking, like binging, purging. It was not fun. And at first I said, "Oh no, this is so normal." Even my brother told me it was normal because he had an eating disorder unknowingly and was like, "I did that all the time." And I was like, That doesn't sound right. It was to the point where like it just became so obsessive. I was thinking about it all the time. I was thinking about ways that I could make myself smaller and kind of like do damage control of what I did on the weekend during the weekdays, and then it would spiral every single week for a few years until finally like my friends kind of like came out and said, "Hey, like we're worried about you.
Mm.
And we're seeing like these like tendencies and we're not sure if like it's like benefiting you." And that's where I started to realize like I was like, I think you're right. Like I don't think I should be swinging so hard in this like pendulum of eating and fitness behaviors.
It's wild that like we can experience these thoughts and we can have an idea that they may not necessarily be the things that are best for us, but like regardless of those thoughts and like understanding that they're probably not the best for us, we still can't help but like acting on the on those intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
So in the process of you first kind of realizing like that was coming on, and then towards getting to be in a position to prep for a bodybuilding competition, like what did that like recovery process look like?
Yeah. So I tried the traditional route and I do think that many people should try it. I think I was a little bit stubborn. So I went to therapy,
Hmm.
had my first therapy session, and I told her she was wrong. And I stormed out of the office. I said, nothing's wrong with me, even though I willingly signed up for the session. But over time, I think like eventually I switched my major. So I was a business major for 3 years and I just really fell in love with like that fitness and nutrition aspect of like my life. Probably started out in the most unhealthy way, but it ended up being like super healthy afterwards. When I changed my majors and wanted to become a dietitian, my coursework was actually the stuff that started to teach me. And then I had the privilege of working under really amazing people in like nutrition research who also had like a very neutral mindset around like body image and published research on like disordered eating, eating disorders like in physique and strength sports.
Mhm.
And it was just so interesting to me to see that like perspective and to put it in like a little bit more of an analytical perspective too. And that's where I started to realize like, oh, what I'm doing is not normal. And like it's normal in a sense that it occurs, but it's not normal in the sense that this is the way that I should be feeling every single day. And that's when I made it like my mission to like do better for myself and to stop like engaging in such obsessive and like disordered behaviors that I knew wasn't going to benefit me long term. Knowing like the side effects and stuff, like what binging and purging could do to me long term and like how that could affect my mental status. I think I personally took that recovery journey on my own through my education.
Mm.
And that's just me though. Like I'm a big person on like learning. And so once I learn, I'm like, yep, I'm good. But of course I do talk about it occasionally in therapy too, just to make sure that like things are all on track.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's probably, I'd imagine there is periods still after overcoming an eating disorder where you maybe have, as you kind of mentioned at the start, like disordered eating
Mhm.
patterns. But I guess it's kind of, you're better at recognizing them and maybe not having that like spiral into something bigger than maybe a kind of one-off event. I guess that's like probably going to be an important distinction to make towards people. What is the difference between like an eating disorder that's
Yes.
like diagnosed and then like disordered eating?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you already alluded to the biggest difference, which is one is a mental health condition that needs to have a formal diagnosis, and the other isn't. But the biggest distinction is that they both have a lot of overlapping characteristics in terms of the tendencies that you experience, whether it's like viewing foods as good or bad, or like maybe, occasionally engaging in certain behaviors that might not be the most like normal in a sense. With disordered eating, it happens on a less frequent level and on a less intense level as well. You might see someone engage in certain behaviors like that every like few weeks, for example. Whereas with an eating disorder, it's persistent disturbances. It
Mm.
is 24/7. You're thinking about food, body, exercise almost every day of like the week and like pretty much every day of the month for years or however long like this like ends up occurring. And more importantly, eating disorders start to impact your quality of life. So this could fall under the category of like starting to impact your physical quality of life or your social quality of life. So avoiding social interactions or noticing that your relationships are falling apart as a result, or hiding in secrecy or isolating yourself because you're too ashamed of what you've been
Mm.
doing.
Yeah, you can see as well how in something like physique sports, some of these tendencies can, to a degree, they can be normalized in like in line towards like the direction of that goal of getting up
Yeah.
on stage. But sometimes it can be people also like masking something that is underlying, which is not all that uncommon. And you see this like in the context of like people coming after like either after the show and maybe not being able to kind of handle the post show period with the actual kind of goal of what that is for. It's like recovering your health, kind of putting on a healthy level of body fat again, starting to decrease some more neurotic tendencies that happen towards the back end of prep and get into a more kind of I guess normal state, right? Like I have the opinion that bodybuilding as a whole should be like a net positive for most people's lives, and like most of the tendencies that like a bodybuilder will do in pursuit of getting on stage, like they are health behaviors turned up to like 12, but like if you turn it back down to like a normal level, they're including fruit and vegetables within their diet, like they're protein seeking, they're trying to manage their body composition, they're trying to manage their calories, they're doing some cardio, they're doing some exercise. But it's when it becomes that's all that is,
Mm-hmm.
like that's everything, and outside of a prep or outside of conditions where you need to be stricter, that you're like, I can't go to my friend's birthday party because I have to stay in my diet. I can't have that slice of birthday cake because it's going to make me fat. And all these things I guess they can turn people into like recluses, can't they? They could pull people away from like friend groups, family groups, and really kind of like harm relationships. And as a result, like that does, like, unless people are there to support the person, it's very hard to kind of claw out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you nailed it on the head. And I know that you're like more immersed in the sport, so you see it quite a lot, during that time. And I always say, like, when I talk about my journey, like in bodybuilding, I always say I wanted to try to be as healthy as possible, respective to the sport, because I know it gets very aggressive and very intense. And once you get to such like a lean state, you're living like that lifestyle. You're living like as a bodybuilder. And yes, like that is what you are supposed to and meant to do. But then when it starts to bleed into other parts of your life and then you're in the off season and you don't even know how to manage that, it's a black and white thing. You're either really, really good and then off season you're not doing so great and your recovery diet just went down the drain, or you're so strict and rigid with yourself that you're not willing to do the off season properly and be healthy in not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. And fostering like relationships and social events and all this other stuff when it comes to like your goals. It's so hard.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the messaging around whether it's bodybuilding or powerlifting, the messaging around I guess what it takes to be your best or what it takes to be a good powerlifter or a good bodybuilder is not always that helpful, because you'll hear in bodybuilding, like, if you cheat in your diet or whatever like that, you're just not cut out for it. Like, if you miss a day of training or something like that, like, like it's not for you. Like, there's all like that's just some of them. Or like, even in regards to people coming off post show, right? Post show notoriously is a very tough period for a lot of people, especially first time competitors. Typically, people are going to probably gain more body weight than they want in a quicker period of time. They're going to struggle with the fact that the goal is over, and then now their goal is shifted towards watching their body change. And quite often, like, the first few weeks after your contest prep, your body composition change does not look fantastic by any stretch. You just look like a bit like a watery mess. But like,
They
um,
look like an alien.
yeah, that's a way to put it. All right, but then you hear people like say, if you've put on too much weight post show or in the first few weeks, you've fucked your off season. And that for a lot of people, especially if they don't have like proper guidance, can make them go down a path of essentially kind of binge restrict, right?
Right.
Because people may hear that and they haven't reached a point of actually being like recovered. They haven't like restored like hormonal balance. They haven't like put on even a sufficient level of body fat yet. They're still struggling with like food focus and having a hard time controlling portion sizes. And then they hear that and then they think, okay, well, next week you need to go on a mini cut, you
Yeah.
know. And then the mini cut starts, and then they're struggling to stick to that because
Hmm.
they're just doing a mini cut for the sake of doing a mini cut because they think they're too fat. Then all of a sudden, after a week, they're like, ah, fuck, I can't stick to this. Let's just go back to gaining. And then it's just like up and down, up and down, up and down. And all of a sudden, the person is in a dark enough mental place. They are like extremely unhappy with their body image. They probably are starting to like have a little bit of discontent for uh, the process of bodybuilding itself, and maybe even considering never competing or anything like that again.
Yeah.
And again, that can quite often be the difference between having some good proper guidance through the post show period or not.
Absolutely. Like I was talking to a friend a few years ago and she competed in figure and she had the most insane physique I had ever seen. And I remember talking to her like once she had decided that she wanted to stop competing. Never really talked about it in public, but she had messaged me after like I was posting a lot of stuff about like eating disorder, disordered eating, and she had shared her entire experience of why she ended up stopping the sport because I kept bringing it up. I was like, when are you going to get back on stage? Like you killed it. Like you were so good. And she had basically said that her last straw was that her last two shows, every time she was nearing the end, like about to step on stage, she binged hard. And instead of her coach kind of like, talking to her and like understanding where she was coming from or understanding why it was occurring or giving her guidance on how to navigate that. He was just like, it's okay, it happens. Move on. Right? Like just get back into the diet and then you'll step up on stage, you're gonna do great, and then you're gonna be fine. And then I asked, obviously, I was like, well, did you have like a recovery diet? Like, what'd you guys do? And she was like, no, he like basically ghosted me and I had to deal that myself. And essentially she binged her entire way through and didn't even know how to navigate that on her own. She had to figure it out herself. And having a good, proper coach who understands you as a person and like more importantly, to know that like you should never feel shameful or guilty about doing these. It doesn't make you any less of an athlete. It makes you a better one because you're able to acknowledge like, these parts of you that make you human. Dieting down that low is so hard, not only just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And like, if you have a coach that just cares and who is willing to talk you through that, obviously within their scope of practice, like
Mm.
it can make a world of a difference.
Yeah, big time. Like I remember when I did my prep, so I did 6 shows during my prep, and before show number 5, we were in Budapest in Hungary, and I was hungry. But like, I think it was like a day or two before the show when we landed. I went to the gym and like I went to my own. Emma went earlier on the day, and when I was walking back, I like passed by a bakery and I was like, some of those pastries I've never seen before, and they look delicious. And I had a moment of weakness. I went in, I got the pastry, and I didn't wait until I got home because I didn't want to eat it in front of Emma. So like I wanted to kind of like hide it essentially. So I ate it on the way home. And when you're walking and eating, you never enjoyed it.
I
Like
know. It's like you
and,
can't, you
and
can't enjoy it in the moment.
so that happened, and then I didn't tell Emma at all because I didn't tell Emma at all because I was just like fuck. Like I've fucked it. Essentially that was my mental chatter. And then the next morning, I remember I went to the shop, had to get like some stuff for breakfast, and I ended up picking up like just this shitty like filled croissant in like
Mhm.
a packet. It looked really nice in the packet, but it was actually like stale and just not nice at all.
Yeah.
So that was another thing that I ate like off plan, and like this hadn't happened at all during prep. Pretty much like bang on, hit my macros to the nail the process. So like this, like it really like internally, I was like, you know, I wasn't doing too good, and eventually I just like told Emma outright, like she was like making she was making breakfast. I'll never forget it. But I was like, Emma, I have to tell you something. She thought I was gonna break up with her.
Oh, no.
It's like I ate pastry, and she's like, so like in my mind that was like the end of the world. And then essentially, so I called my coach. I told him because like fucking 2 days out, and he's there like right this fucking peaking plan, and I'm there eating croissants. And yeah, so I was working with Brad Loomis from 3DMJ, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
just had like he very much put my mind at ease,
Yeah.
because like I was sending him over pictures and everything like that of my physique, and he's like based off how you look, like I wouldn't have been able to tell that like you had more calories than we intended you to have. He's like, well, this could be good information. Maybe the next week we need to give you more food. Probably not more croissants, but like maybe more food. Maybe more food. And like, he just kind of framed it like, this hasn't happened before. if these type of tendencies do pop up again, like we might consider like kind of calling the prep early and kind of starting the recovery diet.
Right.
And yeah, that for me was a massive weight off my shoulders, and it was like nice to know that I was like supported by my coach, and it didn't after that I didn't feel any like kind of annoyance at all. Like obviously I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't follow my plan to letter. That was probably the thing that I was like the most upset about.
Yeah.
But after it, then I was trying to, as a coach, like trying to like think about how I can frame this when I'm coaching my own clients.
Right.
If I coach people to stage, they have something like that happen again. I'll be able to relate to it again. As you mentioned here, like you're a human at the end of the day. And like one action or a couple of behaviors, like across like a sea of like many positive behaviors, doesn't like dictate like how good or bad you are, and especially like when people are early on in a journey, like when you're early on in a journey, whether that is like you get like just trying to like lose some body weight, like take up powerlifting, I don't know, whatever the goal may be, you're gonna make mistakes along the way, and that's completely fine. So part of the process is making mistakes. It's as part of the process as like doing the good behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you learn from them. I chat a lot there, but have you got any insights to any of that? I just
Oh God, no.
feel like
Well,
we went
like
to the massive tangent.
I feel so like honored to like be hearing this entire story because like I mean like obviously I didn't know this about like your journey and it doesn't like change anything that like what we do together, but it's like you're right, like it's not to say that every person should have to experience like bad things for them to be like good coaches or good athletes or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah, yeah. Of course.
But I think a lot of the times, especially like when we're the athlete and we're in the midst of it, we place ourselves in such a high pedestal of needing to do everything right and needing to be perfect. Whether we believe that or not, like we're just like we need to tick all the boxes, we have to do everything correctly, otherwise we won't get the end result that we want. And I know that has a lot to do with like hustle culture and not trying to leave anything on the table, but making those mistakes only show that you are human, that you only become wiser as a result of it. And especially if you have like a good coach like you did and like to guide you through this and just like to again be able to reframe this differently, it like honestly it makes a world of a difference and it just allows you to become stronger and better like the next time like you get up on stage or like on the platform, for example, if you're doing powerlifting, because like I know that that's also like a huge deal for like athletes who are trying to cut down too. So no, like I appreciate you sharing that so much. Like I think
Mhm.
it's a very all-encompassing thing for like whether or not you're a coach or an athlete, and how it really only just makes you wiser.
I think the framing of it is probably like the most interesting and important part, because say for example in my case I saw that as like a big failure, whereas that same competition season I remember it was like the day before I did Worlds and I met the 3MJ team for the first time. I was talking to Alberto Nunez, and it's like one day out from him being on the pro stage, and I was like, "So what are you doing for the evening?" And he's like, Cindy wants to get a bit of pizza, so I think I'm gonna go get a little bit with her." I was like, "Pizza one day out from being on stage? Like what?
Yeah.
What is this?" But like obviously from him having as much experience as he does, having the awareness of his body, and having the understanding that like that may not necessarily be something that's going to massively affect his physique the next day based off all his experience.
Hmm.
But for somebody else, less experience, having that, even she's not not one day out from stage, but like in the middle of their diet, to be like, had a slice of pizza, I've ruined it, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas like yeah, it's such a small piece of the puzzle that like it might not necessarily make the biggest difference at all for that goal. Bodybuilding goal might make a bit more of a difference, or not advocating everybody go out and have pizza night before the show.
Yeah.
But it's more so about how the reframing of it makes a difference, because if that was a case of like somebody being mad stressed about their show, and then they're having something like pizza, and then they're having to talk after the pizza being like, "Oh, I'm
Hmm.
gonna wake up the next day and gonna be all watery, and what about like all the salt and all the carbs, and what about the fat, it's like gonna slow down my digestion," and then all that ruminating causing like the extra worry, extra stress, taken away from the process, and like causing poor night's sleep then, and then waking up the next day and not looking as good as you want, because
Yeah.
a lot of the psychological aspects kind of led to the kind of negative outcome.
Oh God, no one talks about that enough either. I was like, if you ruminate so much about something, like you're basically going to bring it into existence. Otherwise, like if you control like what you can control, like your like the reframing process and just making sure that like you see the bigger picture above all, like it ends up working out like in your favor. It's a very, very curious thing, the
Yeah.
psychological aspect of everything.
So I guess a question I have for you, because I think we said we haven't fully finished off this part.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, what was the point that you knew that once the eating disorder was over and that you felt ready to prep for the show? And what would you, what like, is there anything that you'd probably look out for people who are looking to compete on a bodybuilding stage or figure stage, bikini stage for the first time in regards to these tendencies?
Mhm.
And off the back end of that, would there be different ways that you could maybe reframe kind of people's behavior to them to maybe kind of delay that process and kind of maybe kind of motivate them to kind of delay it to a later time?
So personally for me, because it had been like a few years, I hadn't done anything that kind of like put my body in a harmful position. I intuitively ate and I tracked here and there. I worked out, but like not too much. Sometimes I overdid it, but like, I had like a really balanced way of like eating and like had really balanced my relationship with like food and exercise. I think like maybe many people, I dabbled in it because I was following some of my colleagues who were doing it and I was like, you know what, I want to try that out. Like I feel like my goals are a little bit lackluster right now, and I think I could do it. And knowing that it could be such a dangerous sport, like I had to sit down with my support system and I said, like, hey, like I want to give this a try, but I also know the risks that come with it. And I like said it right off the bat before I even started. I said, I want you guys to be in my corner to make sure that I'm okay. Because if you start to see anything from me that feels concerning or anything like that, like I want you to call me out on like my BS because I don't want to fall back down that like hole because it was so quick to fall back down there and not know what was going on.
Mm.
And even though like I had like a lot more self-awareness at that point, I was like, oh, you never know what prep is going to do to you. And you're right, because like looking back, there were a lot of things that I did during prep where I was like, no, this is fine. I look back and I'm like, I'm still kind of scratching my head. And I think that that was like what kind of like helped me take the jump of having a really healthy relationship with food and exercise and like being at a healthy body weight at that point too. Like I had a good moderate amount of body fat on me, like my labs were great, like nothing was off. And then of course my support system was the biggest thing. I don't think I could have ever made it without them. I talked to them all the time about what was going on. But for other athletes, and I've had worked with other clients who've expressed interest in it, oftentimes like I'll kind of like assess and see like whether or not they are physically or mentally ready, and I'm sure you talk about this with your athletes too of like, hey, maybe you're not ready to step on the stage yet because like conditioning is poor and like maybe we need to take time to like build and whatnot. But from like a food area, if an individual is still experiencing some disordered eating tendencies, I don't know where this comes from because I've actually heard it multiple times where feel like bodybuilding or competing in bodybuilding will actually improve their relationship with food.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah, and I don't know where it is. It's like, well, I have really like crappy behaviors now. Like I think if I just compete, then like my habits will get better and it will stick. And I'm like, I'm not I'm not entirely sure if like that's how it goes.
Mm.
And I kind of have to sit there and educate them and like provide them like insights on like this is what it's actually like. It's not to say that it's impossible, but maybe with where you're at right now, like we need to work on developing a more neutral like perspective of food and body and knowing that bodybuilding is not the solution for the issues that you're experiencing. Giving them the tools and resources and having them use that day in and day out to manage like their nutrition, their training, their body image perceptions, everything like that at a healthy maintenance level before even considering to step in there. And of course, you already know just making sure that you have the basics squared away, like training and nutrition basics and whatnot. So yeah, from
Mm.
a eating disorder perspective or disordered eating perspective, it's really a lot about like education and letting them know like what they're getting themselves into and that it's not the answer for the problems that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with all that because going into bodybuilding to improve your relationship with food, it's kind of just trading one form of disorder for another, really. And like it's it's maybe fine when you're in it, but like then like once it goes, or other negative consequences that come as a result of maybe not acknowledging those I guess blind spots, I guess first, that can be when it can lead to so like things spiraling a little bit deeper, right? Because ultimately at the end of the day, like the bodybuilding process for most people is going to pass. It's like after, like, it could be a year, it could be you do one show, it could be like then after 5 years, 10 years. But if you haven't actually addressed at the core the thing that you're trying to hide initially, it will
Mhm.
still be there once the bodybuilding's over. And like as much goodness as bodybuilding can give people, it definitely does have a tendency to kind of make people more neurotic, right? Like, and
Yeah.
then as well, there's just like, I guess it depends on what echo chamber you fall into too. Like,
Mhm.
you could fall into the echo chamber of, like, it's all about discipline. That's all it is. And if you're again, if you miss your diet or whatever like that, you're just not disciplined enough. You need to work harder, and that kind of mindset works up to a point, but it's not a compassionate one, which I think most people need. Like, I think for somebody to have a successful bodybuilding prep and to come out the back end of it and be excited to continue the process, I think you very much need to like be quite level headed. It needs to be an intrinsic want that you want to get up on that stage because you are want to display your physique. You want to show people the work that you've done, all the kind of hard work that you've put into it, versus just being like, this kind of gives me a reason to have these neurotic tendencies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like it's bodybuilding was like one of the best privileges like I've ever gotten to experience in my life. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. The hardships I had to experience, but also the successes. And like it should be something that adds to your life, not take away, and it should not be used as a tool to fix any of the problems that you're experiencing. It's not, it's honestly just a band-aid at that point, and you're not
Mm.
using it to like, elevate like parts of your life. And yeah, you're right. You should be like proud to like show off your physique and not use it to like really inflate like the neurotic tendencies that you want to engage in, whether you like it or not.
I had a guest on 3 or 4 episodes now ago now, Luca Matney, and he was talking about a client who was kind of struggling a little bit with like the relationship with alcohol in regards to, like, in Ireland, it's like alcohol is just like, it's like drinking water for people, right? It's kind of similar to that, but I guess like with the lads culture, it's like you could be involved in a friend group who all you do when you see them is just drink alcohol, and you might not be somebody who enjoys drinking alcohol all that much. And his client was struggling with the fact that, like, he would say that he can't, like, not drink alcohol, like, and kind of framing it like that, right? Whereas, like, in the context of bodybuilding, like, say for example, I'm away at the moment, I'm in Hamburg. I prepped my meals to bring with me today because I want to, not because I can't go to the supermarket or go to like a restaurant down the road and get whatever I want. It's just because I choose to do it. Like, I don't feel like an impending urge to do it because I need consistency. I need to stay on track. I want to stay on track because I want that goal that I like in the future. But I know that I have the choice there. And I think like a big kind of test for a lot of people who do get involved in physique based sports, weight class based sports, is like, do you allow yourself to have those options? And like, if the options are there, like, will you actually like put yourself to the test and actually like go for them and be
Right,
okay with like maybe being a little bit over your calories, or like your macros not being perfect, or
right.
maybe not having as many kind of fruits and vegetables as you would, or even have like a day of nutrition that's just completely off, but still
Yeah.
being able to get back to it, and like being okay with maybe those days too. Because again, I think again it comes back to the difference sometimes between the person who is struggling more so from the relationship with food side of things. It's, they feel like they can't do the things that other people do and get like the results that they want. They feel like they need to eat out Tupper all the time. They
Yep.
need to eat this from this select list of foods. They
Yeah.
can't have sugar. They can't have seed oils, or whatever the fuck it is. And and as a result of that, that creates the, like, being clustered in, and that creates the unsustainability of the process as a whole, because
Yeah.
the less options you have on the table, the harder ultimately is to stay on track. Like it's like the person going to the fucking birthday party, and everything that's everything that's at the birthday party, they're saying, "Nah, I can't have that because my son's allergic to oxygen." Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, like you nailed it on the head. Like the reframing process is everything, and like also more importantly, like making sure that you reframe it to align with your values, right? Like you brought up a great point. It's like I want to do this because my value is like wanting to succeed on like that platform, right? But you also alluded to making more informed decisions. So like if you choose to do something, like you have to be okay with like the potential outcomes. And as long as you feel informed about that and you can kind of like neutralize your emotions around it, it just makes it all that much better. Like every decision you make, it just has to like be aligned with like who you are as a person, your values, and more importantly, like just knowing that if something happens, it's not the end of the world. um, yeah. I know we're talking so much about bodybuilding. I know you wanted to eventually
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah. That's next stuff. Don't worry, don't
yeah.
worry, don't worry. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, I think we cover a lot there on the bodybuilding front. And look, there's so much you can go into with this, right?
Yeah.
In regards to like the kind of Venn diagram between bodybuilders and people who so like have a poor relationship with food. Like it's nearly a circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess I wanted to talk as well about powerlifting too, right? Because like I guess like that's more so the people that you work with, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I want to talk about this in regards to moving around weight classes, up weight classes, down weight classes. I don't know if people still do it, but like, do people still like have like a username and then say like what their weight class is or put the weight class in
Yes.
their bio? Like,
Like,
yeah, that's
look, have you seen Austin Perkins? Not to, I love him by the way. We're good acquaintances, and it's like, hey, be 76 kg.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's God, like, yeah. I don't know. You're gonna have to put like a decimal point in the name at some point. Like,
You know?
I change every day.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah. So when it does come to powerlifting, obviously, like it is a weight class based sport. What are some of the things that you kind of point out to like an athlete who is maybe kind of skirting around a weight class and maybe feel as if they should be either up a weight class? That's the most common, right? Is people being resistant to move up weight classes.
Right,
What kind
right.
of things that you're kind of looking at there in regards to either kind of motivating that change or seeing if the person is ready for change, or what's the kind of conversation around that?
Yeah, think the first thing is like talking to them about like why these weight class goals are important to them, to get them to better understand like, well, what are your like inherent like intrinsic values towards like being tied to like this specific weight class? What are you going to get out of it? Is it because like you want a higher dot score? Is it because you want like the best total? Like, are you gonna win anything? Yada yada yada. A lot of times it's personal goals, like I want to do this because it will give me XYZ and whatnot. There's always like some specific outcome that we need to discuss. And then of course, like I never want to invalidate like their goals, but I also say like, okay, well, now that we're listing these out, like your dot score or potential money or something like that, now let's compare it to like how you're experiencing like these weight gain or weight cut goals and how that's impacting your quality of life and whether or not you feel like it's worth pursuing. A lot of the times, like I'll have athletes like really just be like, this is what I wanted all like my life. Like I really think that like I'm just going to be a better athlete as a result and blah, blah, blah. And I really have to ask them like, where are you getting like these thoughts
Mm.
from? Like what objective measures can you get out of this? Like if you move up or down, and like really putting a lot of that conversation into their head and like their hands because like they are the ones that are guiding like their journey as an athlete, right? So they really need to genuinely understand, why am I choosing this weight class in the first place? And is it justifiable? Other than like these like initial goals that you set out for yourself, like I'm gonna have like a 400 dots, or like I'm gonna, it's very goal dependent. But once we kind of like discuss all of that, then this is where like a heavier conversation comes in and saying like, all right, well, this is what we're going to be required to do to get to that point. We'll talk about the plan. And if at any point you kind of feel like it's working against you in some way, obviously like let's try to troubleshoot it. Um, understand what the root causes to those problems are and whether or not it's worth like kind of moving forward. I'll use an athlete for example. She competes as a 52. And she has been competing for a 52 for a real long time. She's incredibly competitive, but she's competitive as a 52
Mm.
and not anything else, unfortunately. And right now we are in the midst of a really sticky cut because she has unfortunately been experiencing a lot of issues adhering to her diet. And it like constantly the food noise is so loud. She's falling off plan almost every single day, not even week at this point, almost every single day. And we really had to sit down and I had to ask her, I'm like, you know, I want to do this with you too. And like, I understand like where your goals come from. Cause she had said like straight out, she's like, girl, like I could win worlds with this. And she was like, I missed out on worlds. She had to drop out because like the same problems happened last time. And she's like, I want to do whatever it takes to get to this point, but like I just don't want to be so miserable this time around. And I said, all right, then let's talk through it, right? So we got her in therapy.
Mm.
And like she was like, I really think this is going to help. There are some other things going on in her life right now that we think is contributing to some of those like habits and like that food noise. And then on top of that, we're going to hop on a call like fairly soon to just kind of readjust things and make sure that the rate of loss is a little bit more sustainable, stuff like that. It's a hard conversation. It is not easy to have. And like initially, like sometimes my first inclination is just compete where you're at,
Yeah.
be happy and just compete where you're at. And like because like you're going to feel so tainted towards powerlifting because of this ideology of you needing to be in a higher or lower weight class sometimes. And I'm like, you have to, your goals really have to genuinely be worth it to you, not to me, to you at the end of the day.
Mm. Yeah, I think is a lot of times when people actually start competing in powerlifting that they have like the issues around going up and down the weight class, right? Like obviously it's gonna start when they are actually competing in
Yeah.
in the fucking sport, but like most people when they get into like doing strength training, they're like, I want to be like the strongest version of myself. I want to have the biggest squat, the biggest deadlift, the biggest bench press that I can get. And then once they enter into the weight class, they start thinking of I want to be the most competitive version of myself. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, unfortunately, the competitive, like, there's a competitive few, right? And then there's everybody else. And I fall into the everybody else category, right?
You and me both.
But for everybody else, that's like, I do think that's kind of where there has to be a bit more of a kind of like, I guess you have to be a little bit kind of humble and have a bit of humility when it does come to,
Hmm.
what your aspirations with doing powerlifting are, and how is being in a certain weight class, how is that serving you, or is it working against you? Because I
Hmm.
know it's very common when people do get into powerlifting and they kind of see that they're kind of strong, they could be kind of in that competitive view, but maybe they're like 20 years old and they're in the 93 kilo weight class and they're 92. They haven't even fully grown like into like a complete human just yet, you know?
Still a baby.
Yeah. 20 years old, still baby. Yeah. No, but like even like some juniors, it's definitely a big like very common with them. And there's like, oh well, if I just stay in this weight class I can get like this national record. I can get like this whatever this like all time deadlift record or something like that. And it's like, but yeah, like, can you realistically kind of see yourself kind of training in this sport for like the next 5, 10 years, where realistically to get better and better, you're probably gonna have to put on some muscle mass. Muscle mass that weighs something. So for you to kind of continue doing this and continue getting better, like it's kind of something that will probably have to happen over the course of time. There's probably going to be difference if somebody's coming into the sport and they have a higher body fat level, right? Because like there could be some recomposition happening there. Maybe they're best suited in a lighter weight class. But for most people entering into it, they're probably gonna gain some weight if they want to be like the strongest version, the most competitive version
Yeah.
of themselves. And you see this all the time, like with junior lifters when they're kind of resistant to putting on weight, they're doing okay in a weight class, and then they go up like one or two weight classes, and then they are competitive.
Yeah.
Like some of your best totals, your best lifts, they could be in you, but they're 20 kilos heavier than you are right now. And I guess that comes to the conversation. And I'm curious to know how you kind of navigate this. Is like how do you pull people? How do you guide people through that? Because naturally, there's gonna be the part of you who starts doing powerlifting or starts lifting weights because you like how your body composition is, but you also equally like being competitive or want to be the best powerlifter that you can be. how do you like allow somebody or guide somebody to the point of becoming the best powerlifter they can be, even if that's not necessarily where their body composition is gonna be the best?
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever heard of the saying like your dream body like is probably a different weight than you think it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I live by that so much because I think a lot of the time it's so hard because like in powerlifting it's a weight class sport, right? And we often compare ourselves to other people in our weight classes. And the beauty of the human body is that we are all so different despite how we weigh. So I initially started out in the 60 kg class and looking around all me, everyone else is shorter than me. Everyone else is a little bit stockier than me. And people are looking at me like, you need to be a 67, 6'7.5". I said, I don't even know if I can fill that out. And I initially had like so much fear around that. And I was like, I could never get to that point. But statistically, we actually find that a lot of people who start out powerlifting end up bumping up 1 to 2 weight classes anyways,
Mm,
due to a lot of like muscle growth along the way because of like how competitive they are. And I start off with that usually. I'm always like, hey, just so you know, like statistically speaking, like a lot of powerlifters do end up going 1 to 2 going weight classes. Almost no one who is competitive ends up staying in the weight class that they started out with. And you can talk to any of them. Talk to Perk, talk to Russ Swole, like talk to any of them. They never started out where they once were. They had to kind of move up because like their body was just no longer capable of staying that low. And like we have to kind of ask ourselves like you're constantly comparing yourself to all these like elite athletes, but you're not understanding the journey that it took for them to get to that point. And so I talk through some of my like talk with my athletes about these things and saying like powerlifting is something that should be enjoyed long term because
mm,
it's a long term game. Like you don't get to the point of elite like athletes because you lifted for a year, right? Like that is years and years and even decades under their belt for them to get to the point where they are at. And so I think a lot of the times, and I don't mean to say this in a way that is offensive or mean or rude, because I felt this way about myself too. I think a lot of novice lifters think that they are going to be the next competitive power lifter at their first meet.
mm,
And they're like, I'm gonna do so well and I'm gonna fill out just this specific weight class that I like want to be at and I'm just gonna be competitive early on. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. And talking them through that and just kind of understanding like what's going to be the most realistic, especially if they're just not genetic freaks, unfortunately, that it's going to be a few years and that it's okay to grow out of their weight class and to help them meet their potential and not limit themselves through like constant cutting or trying to like fill out their weight class too fast. Like give their bodies an opportunity to just grow naturally or cut naturally or whatever that may be for them to experience like, the progressions in their training.
mm.
Yeah, I do often start out with just saying like, hey, like your dream competitive physique or weight is going to be different than what you think it's going to be. And then more importantly, yes, there are statistics that show that people end up growing out of their weight class. And you have to understand that it's a long-term game with a sport.
Yeah, powerlifting is an interesting one in the sense that, like, not everybody who starts playing football automatically thinks that they're going to be like the next Messi. But like in powerlifting, because it's such a simple fucking sport, like people do have like a kind of tendency to think that they are going to be elite outright, and there's nothing wrong with like wanting to be the best that you can be and be like be incredible lifter in your own right. But yeah, I remember I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I was showing him John Hack, who's like the best powerlifter like of all time, realistically, like
Yeah.
and he's like, "Why can't you just do that?" And I was like, I, I was like, this like asking like somebody who's playing like English conference level two football to like again to Lionel Messi and just like why can't you just do what he does? It's
Right.
like there's levels to it. There's time invested into the process. There is genetic components, environmental aspects. Having the means and opportunity to be able to kind of pursue the thing, having supportive environments around you. There's so much that goes into like becoming the kind of best powerlifter that you can be. And then there's naturally enough that resistance to wanting to either do the work or put on the weight that's needed for a lot of people. If they were told outright that like if you wanted to be the if you wanted to be an elite powerlifter but you had to gain 30 kilos, a lot of people probably say no, because like they just don't want to go through the process of number one having to gain it, and then they might just like the body image at that weight just may not be worth worth it for them. But for some people, again, there's going to be different levels of distance for some people. Some people like they could have plenty of body fat and they're like, I don't care, like
Yeah.
doesn't bother me. But for some people, that's enough. But it could be in those extra kilos of body weight or whatever that their kind of their ultimate level is. That's okay. But ultimately, that it all comes down to the kind of conversation around, again, what are your goals, what are your values, what you really want out of this, and then as well come back to, okay, well, within those constraints, like how do we get you to be the best that you can be?
Hmm.
Like I started powerlifting and I was like 83 kilos at my first competition. So
Yeah.
like now I'm 100 kilos. And when I was 83 kilos, I remember like writing down, I used to write down every year in my journal what I wanted my lifting goals to be for that year. So I write down like, current squat, bench, deadlift, what I wanted to achieve that year, as well as a
Right.
body weight goal and like how I wanted to look. And I remember like writing down like I'd be so happy if I ever got up to like 90 kilos and I still had like some visible abs. And then I'm 100 kilos and I have like fat abs. Like that's a big win. But like I never would have thought I would have gotten to that place, only for the fact that like through that process there was very much a kind of pursuit of just trying to be stronger than I thought I could be.
Yeah.
Essentially, like I've only my last competition there was I in a position to do well,
Yeah.
and yeah, to do well, and all the other ones, I wasn't necessarily even chasing other people. It's just a case of like I wanted to be able to squat X number. Okay, I'm gonna have to put up some body weight. I feel stronger at that body weight, and lo and behold, like the more often I guess you kind of go up weights and you go through the recomp process. I guess like a lot of us do as powerlifters when you're kind of going up and down to kind of stay within a weight class, and then realizing that you're too muscular, too heavy to stay within a weight class, and you go to the next one, you unlock like new levels of strength and your body composition just continues to improve. Like a lot of people who do powerlift for a long period of time, I probably will find as they go up to 1 to 2 weight classes that Melissa mentioned there, that like their physique just tends to look better and better. It's like that person who you're having a conversation with and you're like, yeah, how do you feel about going up like 1 to 2 weight classes? But you also say, how would you feel if you had an extra 10 kilos of muscle mass in your frame? That
Hmm.
would you be happy with that? Like, it doesn't sound too bad now.
I know. It's like, again, reframe the process. I mean, I experienced a little bit some of the same too. Like, I initially, like, I just kind of like kept myself in that bubble of like, I just want to be 60 kilos. This is where I naturally exist. And so I kind of put myself in that bubble of like, I just want to compete where I'm at. And even then, like, with just intuitive eating and then like training and stuff, things went well until they didn't. And afterwards, that's when I like purposely like went through a little bit of a gaining phase. Around 63 is when I hit some of like my best PBs. I'm sitting here like, wow, like just 3 kilos like helped me hit such amazing like PRs. And like, I don't know why I kept kind of like holding myself back in terms of like wanting to put on like more mass, not just like mass, but like more muscle mass too, to achieve those goals. And so I think we often kind of like limit ourselves so much and like what our potential looks like. And people are like, yeah, of course, like the heavier you are, like, the more than you can weigh. But I was like, but you need to reframe it in the sense of like, this is a lot of lean mass too.
Mm.
And like, just because you're not going to be in that weight class forever doesn't mean that you don't have the potential to get stronger.
Yeah, yeah. As the saying goes, there's no weight classes in the jungle.
No,
You
I
know,
never heard of that, but that's a good one.
have you that?
Oh,
Oh my God,
that's a new one to me.
it's not as common as I thought. Then, yeah, I remember I was reaching out for coaching for the first time with somebody ages ago. I never followed through in it because their question that they asked me in their consultation kind of shook me to the core, and it was they asked me what my goal was, and I was like, I want to be the weight that I am now, is like 85 kilos or something at the time, but I want to be this with like lean with abs, and they're like, what does being 85 kilos, like what does being at that weight like mean to you? I was like, what? What did you just ask me? It's like I don't fucking know. Like, he
That's a
started
good
going,
question,
yeah, he
though.
started going through like the kind of like the five whys or whatever like that, and I was like, don't know. Like 85 just sounds like a nice number.
Yeah.
That's also it's kind of related to the weight class question as well. But like I'm sure you have conversation with clients too, and like I just want to get to this weight. I feel my best at this weight. Whatever. They're gonna have a few kind of like connotations as to why X weight feels the best for them. The weight where you kind of feel the best, like it can change over time just based off the fact of you kind of gaining muscle and everything like that over time. And I guess I know we're kind of going a little bit more off topic here, but I
Mhm.
guess there's more to why you feel the best at a certain weight than that number itself. Like I think I usually try to get people to tie it to a number of different behaviors that they're doing when they are at that weight, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
are you looking after yourself? Are you training? Are you eating good nutrition? Like are you like being compassionate to yourself? Like that kind of stuff. Are you sleeping well? Are you keeping stress low? And I think then it can come back to that weight, but it's not necessarily that they could get to that weight and still feel shitty about themselves or not be happy with their body image or whatever like that because it's not necessarily the weight. It's all the kind of actions and behaviors that kind of come alongside that.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that I actually also tell people too is like when they say like this is the weight that I had always felt the best at, aside from like the behaviors and stuff, I always tell them like, remember that that is the only proof your brain kind of knows right now. And it's like they're using some of that like previous proof to say like, hey, this is proof that I did my best at this weight
Mm.
and I want to achieve that again. And I always try to like, guide my clients in saying like, well, what's to say you can't create new proof to your brain that it's possible to achieve that, but maybe at a different body weight? And like still engaging in a lot of like those behaviors that helped you feel really good. What's to say that that's not possible? And like I look at them, I'm like, you're really putting yourself in a box. Like you're saying this is only possible. This is the only thing that I can do to help me feel great. And I'm like, you're limiting yourself,
Mm.
truly.
Yeah, yeah. Think most of the limitations we have we impose on ourselves, I guess. I guess I wanted to kind of steer a little bit into the kind of body image aspect of this as well, because I guess it is kind of very much tied into kind of everything that we're speaking
Mhm.
about here. But I guess body image is something that people talk a lot more about now. What what is body image, and like
Yeah.
how can we help with our own?
Yeah, yeah. So the formal definition of body image is an individual's thoughts, feelings, perceptions surrounding their body image or like their body and how they think other people's perceive them as well. And a lot of it is subjective. So again, it is all about your own personal perceptions of what you think you look like and how you think other people see you. And so, yeah, that's the formal definition. I think it's a very all-encompassing thing when we talk about body image, and we really have to realize that like body image is something that we kind of create in our own head of how we view ourselves and how we value ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction to talk through, like to mention about, like it's the thoughts and kind of feelings around it versus just how your body looks, because
Hmm.
same person on a different day can have completely different kind of ideas as to how the actual visual of their body looks, right?
Hmm.
Like you can have somebody misses the gym for a day and then all of a sudden the next day they're like kind of look a little bit softer there, and like they start to have like all these kind of like negative
Hmm.
thought patterns, and they're a little bit kind of harsh on themselves, being mean to themselves, and
Right.
naturally enough that can affect other actions then through the day too, and then those actions, behaviors, they start to reinforce this like more kind of like negative body image too.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, I kind of like dozed out just a little bit. That I'm gonna admit that.
Oh good. Oh good.
Just
Yeah.
the last part. That was I got everything else. It was just the last part.
Yeah. So I was saying how so when if somebody misses like the gym, and then like the next day they see themselves and like they're the exact same person, they look the exact same, like from an objective point of view, but in their mind they're like, look a little bit softer today, haven't I? Look a little bit fat, and then all of a sudden, like that kind of like harshness starts to affect other behaviors that they're doing throughout the day. Maybe you're like, "Ah, sure, like I'm bit fat here anyway, so I may as well have like an extra serving of Nutella in my oats or something like that."
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden that like behavior there reinforces the kind of negative thought pattern and starts to affect their body image again, and then all these kind of actions start to compound.
Yeah, yeah, and they do. It's unfortunate because, like, from an objective standpoint, like, you probably don't look any different than you did yesterday. I think a lot of the time, and I also think this has a lot to do with misinformation, lack of education, and kind of understanding, like, how do our bodies actually respond to acute changes in our eating, our exercise routine, and stuff like that. But it's always like these just immediately, like kind of like once you feed into like that negative perception of yourself, it starts to kind of like overinflate. And then it becomes this kind of like back and forth of like, when I'm doing good, when I'm engaging in all of these like behaviors that are supposed to be good, then that's when my body image is good. And then, of course, if I take an unexpected rest day, or I didn't get all my steps in, or I ate ice cream instead of like my protein brownie at the end of the day, like I am now inherently bad. And so now I have bad body image.
Yeah, yeah. I think I see a lot more message now about like, you know, people or influencers not being fake or influencers being like real, right?
Yeah.
Where like, when they have like ice cream and they have like a bloated
Right.
belly, they'll take a picture, be like, look at my food, baby, this kind of thing. Or one thing I actually find is hilarious. Do you know on the iPhones now, there's either a man who's pregnant or a man who has a food baby. Did you ever see that icon? There's a
Yes, I
yeah,
did. It's like, are we talking about like
yeah.
bearing, or like I just have a food
It
baby?
looks like third trimester.
I know. I think they're like, okay, okay.
Where is he going with that? Yeah, but I think there is more kind of helpful messaging on that side of things. But then there's also like the opposite side of things, like, well, oh, if you're bloating, you should be having your fucking lemon and chia seed water kind of shite, right? Like that's also just like unhelpful stuff, because that kind of gets people to kind of fall down the kind of rabbit hole of
No.
like every change in their body has to be something that's negative and has to be corrected,
Yes.
versus just like your body changes like day to day. Like, if I wake up in the morning, I'm more dehydrated. Go to bed at night, like, and have more food in me, bit have more hydration in me. Like, I'll be heavier, or whatever, like that. I might be a little bit more bloated after my last meal. And isn't that cool that my body can change like that from the morning time to night time? And here after the gym, I look great when I have a pump and
Right.
everything. Like, these are the vision of you after the gym with a pump is the vision that you want in your mind of you all the time.
Every
But
day,
yeah,
every
unfortunately,
second.
that's just not how it is. Like, I think when at times where uh, maybe trying to cultivate like a bit more of awareness around these like ways that your body does change is like in times like that, where like, you go on holidays for a week, you don't have access to a gym, where you should be enjoying yourself as best you can, but like all of a sudden, because you've had a few different meals than you usually would, then you start to like not enjoy the holiday as much, because all you can think about is like the tiny little bit of roll that's coming over your shorts, which isn't even there, that nobody can notice. These kind of things where, again, you're trying to do normal things, normal behaviors. All of a sudden, this thing that you've created in your mind
Right.
has taken away from the process. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, I guess, like, a question for you is like, how do you get people to quiet those negative voices down?
It is a process. Like, I wish it was just one conversation or
Mm.
one pep talk that would really help them, like, start to realize that it is okay for their body to be very fluid and dynamic, and to understand that, like, their body image perceptions are their own, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, that's how other people see them too. Because, like, a lot of the times, we tie our body image to how other people see ourselves as well. As much as we can practice and believe that like we should not care about what other people think of us, I think inherently as humans, like we do at the end of the day. Like that's how we kind of like in relationships and social connections and like, you know, that person who's sitting down and they're like, "Oh, I ate a little bit too much. Like now I have a roll coming off my pants. Oh my God, someone else notices it. Like I have to hide it. Like I have to do all these
Yeah.
things to like protect myself and protect this image that they want other people to think of themselves too. And then of course they want them to feel that way as well. It's so hard. And so like the conversation starts with like acknowledging that like, hey, we are experiencing like a little bit of like, negative perceptions towards our body image. Like, why do you think that is? And where do you think that stems from? It's starting again with where that root cause is. Once we've touched on the root cause, it's then becomes like the very long-term practice of unlearning behaviors and then making space for new like perceptions and like again reframing like your mindset and your kind of the behaviors that you do to reinforce those positive ones versus the negative ones. And so I take a very much so root cause approach to it because like it's very multifaceted. It's not just my parents used to call me fat growing up and all this other stuff. It could be a lot of things. And so addressing that first is important because it gets to like the reasons why it's occurring. And then we talk a little bit more about ways that we can again unlearn like old behaviors or thought processes and make room for new ones and ensure that like we're constantly reframing. So if we experience like a negative thought like I feel fat today because I ate a croissant, and like but instead of saying like something like that, we could reframe it, well, you know what, I ate this croissant because I was craving it and I was low in energy and I needed it and I feel a lot better now. Focusing on things like how we feel versus how we look is going to start to tie a lot more positive kind of like connotations to the behaviors that you're doing and kind of essentially just neutralizing the situation.
Yeah, I guess it's trying to shift away from the always the visual being the most important part
Yeah.
of the conversation, right? Like even I had a conversation with a client there 2 weeks ago or something like that in a check in, and she was noting a lot more things to do with her body than usual, and like we have been like going through like a weight gain phase, like trying to put on muscle she's never done before, and naturally enough having a lot more kind of like a bit hesitant around it, right? Kind of seeing the changes because she's always been told or taught like she's a little bit older, like so she always like when she was growing up, the perception of what it meant to be like a beautiful woman would have been like to be like stick thin essentially, right? Whereas like now she's gone the opposite direction, she's gaining weight and she doesn't really know how to feel about it. So she's mentioning lots of different things, and I was like just curious, like how often like are you kind of actually like assessing like your body composition? Like really like we'll take your pictures to kind of measure body composition, but outside of that, like I'd rather you not pay attention at all. It's like how often do you kind of check your body composition? You're like, yeah,
Mm.
well, when I walk by like mirrors, I would like, kind of like look to see how my ass is, or like, look to see how my waist is. I'm like, okay, we need to like try to kind of add another behavior in there, or when you're having these like more kind of negative thoughts around that, because like, look, you look in the mirror, you see it, and you're like, I look great, like that's okay, cool, benign,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
look good, but if it's like you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, Jesus Christ, I'm a hippo today. Like
Yeah.
you need to follow that up with something that's positive. So I told
Right.
her like every time you see like you see your body or like you have a negative thought about your body, I want you to follow up with something positive, something that your body does for you. Because just by kind of following up with something like that, you're starting to build up an awareness or like mental bank of like all the things that you appreciate your body, like like your body's ability to go into the gym and perform and lift heavy weights, your body's ability to do the training and recover from it and be able to bounce back and get in there the next day. Your body's ability to, fucking I don't know, whatever it is, digest food and like have normal poops or whatever
Yeah.
it is.
Exactly. I mean, like, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, exactly. So, you can have a whole host of different kind of positive things that you can
Yeah.
reaffirm to yourself. But like, because yeah, there's people out there who don't have the opportunity for that. Like, but like, how great of an opportunity is it that we can pursue the development or physique as like a fucking hobby, like
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
or how lucky are we that we can be like, I'm a little bit fat here when like what 700 million people in the world are like fucking starving every day.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
get a grip.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a genuine privilege. And like it's literally like following up the negative thought with but. Always like, okay, I feel this way, but you know what? Like reframing it to a point where it's like, I get to do this. And we
Yeah.
have to understand that like a lot of the times like all of these like physique goals that we do like it is a thing that we get to do because like again we have that privilege to do so, and but working through like a lot of those issues with like disordered eating, body image and stuff like that, those are also very real problems as well.
Yeah.
But you know, gotta be a lot more realistic about it in the sense that like this is something that you're choosing to do, and if you really want this to go well, you have to challenge those limiting beliefs. You have to challenge those negative thoughts because you're going to be so miserable forever if like you keep thinking that like you're constantly going to be chasing this thing that's never going to happen. Like
Mm.
I think a lot of the times people just think that like they exist as like this one static body image and that's how they look 24/7, when in reality like the way that we move and shift, we're so dynamic, we look different at any angle depending on what we eat and how we exercise and all this other stuff. It's a literal constant change like every second of the day, and it's like it's such a beautiful process, like the human body. I went off on a tangent about that, but like Yeah, you alluded to it perfectly. I was
We're,
just like,
we're here.
love, like,
We're here for tangents. Yeah, I remember. You probably don't know him, but his name is Gary McGowan, Skinny Gas. I used to work with him under triage, and he had a great post years and years ago, and I was like, your body should be the least important thing or least interesting thing about you. And
yeah,
it's so true because your body is going to change over time. One day you're fucking 8 pack Dalton lines, and then next day you're 80 years old and you have the saggy skin down to man. And like, do you think at 80 years old you're gonna care about your fucking body image? Probably not. You're probably gonna
no,
have other things that you're thinking about. Like, who died yesterday? That kind of stuff.
yeah. You're like, there goes Steve.
So like it's gonna change. So understanding that it's gonna change over time, it's gonna change day to day. And I guess just being able to kind of build somewhere and stuff like that over time and understand that it's a never ending process really. Like there's still days like I'd say that I'm lucky that I've got pretty good body image and pretty good whatever acceptance of what I am. And that wasn't always the case. It took a while for me, I guess, to get there. I broke away from comparing myself to other people, whether that is physique, like my lifts or anything like that. And there's definitely times where I had like fucking bad body image days or whatever. And there still is days to a degree, but the amount that it weighs on me or how long that period lasts is like negligible now because I can catch it because I have the kind of tools needed to essentially overcome it, like the whole reframing and stuff that we've been talking about. And I guess the question for you, Melissa, is like if you want to like learn more about this type of stuff and like to like upskill themselves or educate themselves more, like what type of things would you recommend they look into?
Yeah, I definitely social media has gotten so big nowadays where I think a lot of these resources are readily available. I would love for people to look into eating disorder like dietitians or therapists or something like that, or even just disordered eating. Like if you're not like ready to dive into this heavy stuff like that, even like disordered eating therapists or dietitians or nutrition coaches, anyone who kind of like promotes a lot of their content on their page should definitely like follow them, right? Like it brings a lot of positive media to you because we're just constantly faced with a lot of like these societal pressures of like, here's the next like trend to help you lose like 10 pounds in like a week and blah, blah, blah. But like once you start to bring that into your feed in some way, shape, or form, it really starts to put a lot of like positive messages onto your page and not like these toxic positivity ones, but more realistic ones. It provides like very like valuable education on things that could be contributing to like these behaviors that you've noticed in yourself or in your clients or your loved ones, but then also provides you like valuable things that you can do to help those cases as well. Like it's really nice and refreshing to see because it starts to shift like your perceptions around body image, weight, anything like that. Like whether or not like you're a physique or a strength athlete, at the end of the day, like we all struggle with it. It's just a matter of do you feel like you have the knowledge, the resources, the tools to pull you out and make sure that you're grounded again and you're allowed to like keep moving forward. So I would love for people to start with media first because I think we're just a media centric like generation now. I think that might be the easiest. And then of course, like if you guys want to look into like ebooks, textbooks, anything like that, there are a lot of like valuable resources out there too. I can't list any off the top of my head, but if I do, I'd be more than happy to provide that to you after our video.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, follow Melissa. You put a good information on that type of stuff as
I
well from
appreciate
time to
it.
time,
Yeah.
don't we? Yeah, people who come to mind off the top of my head, Shannon Beer. Have you heard of Shannon Beer?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
She
She
puts
was
out.
a really big follow of mine, like all over my page during my bodybuilding prep, actually.
Yeah, yeah. She puts out a good deal of information on this
Yes,
stuff. Lauren Conlon, I believe, as well. Do
yes,
you know her as
her
well?
as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I think she does too.
I want to say there's also a coach on 3DMJ's team. I want to, I
Oh,
don't know if she's a
what's her fucking
therapist.
name? I can't remember off the top of my
I want
head.
to say it starts with A, but it could be wrong.
Is it Andrea?
I want to say it's Andrea, but
No,
I
it's not
could.
Andrea. That's Andrea Valdez. Now there is another Trainer J. I can't remember her name. I fucking
Yeah,
met her as well, which
yeah,
is the worst part. But anyway, I'll link her.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah. Look, Melissa, I really appreciate your time and
Thanks for having
all of
me.
your sharing all the information and goodness today with the audience. I want to let people know where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Malisa Nguyen. And otherwise, I'm gonna drop a little bit more of a what's the word called? I'm gonna
Set
shout my course out if
plug,
like
yeah,
that's okay.
yeah, plug the
Yeah,
course.
If you want to learn more about specifically like the basics of like nutrition and powerlifting, and then we are also touching a lot more on disordered eating, eating disorder, and body image in that course as well, alongside with like everything else like rapid weight cuts, and then of course meet day prep nutrition strategies, then you can again follow me at Melissa Nguyen and my colleague who's also working with me on this course at Powerlifting Dietitian or Powerlifter Dietitian. His name is Dan Feldman. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. He's also a dietitian as well. And that course is going to be releasing at June 2025. So very
Awesome.
invaluable course, in my opinion,
All right.
but very
I look
awesome.
forward to seeing it. I'll definitely be signing up.
Yeah.
So sign-ups are like June? Did you say?
Yes, so we'll do like an early like release for those who are subscribed to our email list, and then we will officially do the hard launch in June 2025.
Awesome. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So look, if you're interested in expanding your brain and learning more about nutrition and everything to do with powerlifting, nutrition, and learning a little bit more about what we discussed in today's podcast, go over and check out Melissa's page. Check out her course that she'll have launching. And if you did like the episode, make sure to leave a rating or a review on the podcast platform you're listening on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We will catch you in the next one.